Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Greg Sterling. I'm the VP of Strategy for LSA, and I'm joined by Monica Ho, who's the CMO of SOCi, and we're very, very excited to present the results of the first of many forthcoming localized social marketing benchmark reports. And we'll go to the next slide. And the next slide. And you get to see our faces. That's me on the left and Monica on the right, in case there was any confusion. And what we're going to do here is Monica's going to introduce the project and talk about what it was trying to measure, the inspiration behind it, and what actually we learned at the highest level. And then I'm going to unpack the methodology and get into the data in a little more detail. And then we will have time for your questions about any aspect of this. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica to get into the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you to everyone that was able to join us today for the webinar. We're really excited to reveal this collaborative project that the LSA and SOCi have been working on for many months. And as Greg promised, before we actually dive into the research and the data, we wanted to give a little bit of background behind what the LSM benchmark is and why it's important to brands and businesses. So it's a collaborative research project between the Local Search Association as well as SOCi. For those that are unfamiliar with the Local Search Association, they're obviously a leading global association that helps marketers and agencies really realize the full potential of localized marketing through a series of insights, reports and research, a series of events, and a number of other educational materials. SOCi is a leading platform for social and reputation management for multi-location brands. And we came up with this project as a way to better understand a really interesting and important area of marketing. I almost said new, but it's not a new area. These areas that we're going to be covering today are not necessarily new areas of local marketing, but they're highly important and really need a lot more awareness and attention by marketers. So what this research examined was, how are the top franchise marketers doing in this area of marketing that we're calling localized social marketing? And we're defining that success in a couple of different areas. So we're looking at local social presence, how brands are attending to their ratings and reviews or customer care, and then what does their local engagement look like in these channels? So the core of the research studied a total of 163 brands, and we ranked those brands on a 100-point scale to come up with a benchmark. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into these components in just a second. I talked about this area of marketing that we're calling localized social marketing, or LSM. And just to make sure we're all on the same page as to what that means, I wanted to provide just a brief definition. When we talk about localized social marketing, we're talking about those areas of marketing that focuses on a local business and their presence. And it usually involves some sort of two-way communication channel between the business and their local customers. So when you think about those areas, they include ratings and review sites, local directories like Google My Business, social advertising or social pages like Facebook, and then other third-party sites when you think about YELP and others. So to give you an example of what this looks like and why it's important, I had mentioned Google My Business, highly important in the localized social marketing space, simply because 9 out of 10 consumers start their search for local business information on Google at the start. So when those searches are being conducted, 9 times out of 10 or more times than not, they're going to end up on a local Google My Business page. So I think I might have animation here, maybe not, nope. So from these listings that you see here or through the knowledge panel, a lot of customers, when they're looking for local business information, are ending up in these Google My Business pages. And because they're so rich in information and features, a lot of those consumers are actually staying on these pages and not and actually executing or finding the information they need and not actually clicking anywhere else. And that's introduced this, this thing called zero-click search, where we're finding that 6 out of 10 mobile local searchers that are landing on these pages aren't clicking off. So they're either finding what they need on the Google My Business pages or they're not. So again, a highly important area for businesses to understand and make sure that they have accurate coverage in. The other thing to understand about not only Google My Business pages, but other areas in localized social marketing, when you think about sites like Yelp or local Facebook pages, you've got this increasing importance of ratings and reviews. You can see them, they're pretty prominent here just on a local search result. But ratings and reviews are becoming highly important because they're not only now a primary factor that consumers use in making a decision on which business to visit, but they're also a top 3 ranking factor in terms of where your business is listed in results. And that applies to GMB pages as well as Facebook and other sites. So again, a couple of areas of localized social marketing that I just want to pinpoint on: Google My Business, and then this area of ratings and reviews. I mentioned the zero-click search, and for those that don't have a lot of background here, I just wanted to provide a little bit more detail. So again, no-click or zero-click searches just means that when a consumer conducts a search, they're actually landing on that search engine results page that gives them the answer to whatever they were seeking. A lot of times that is executing on that knowledge panel, or that local business information that appears in the right-hand side of a search page. And because they're finding what they need, they're kind of converting or executing from that page only and not clicking off. And you can see that trend is increasing. So again, just kind of emphasizing the fact that those pages and that information is so essential. We also talked a little bit about social and the fact that these localized social pages are also falling into this area of localized social marketing. And a lot of businesses sometimes forget that there is a lot of business search actually happening within these social platforms as well. So when you look at just search volume in totality, we all know Google is the #1 search engine, but Facebook is also a top 3 when you just look at the overall volume of search being conducted. And some might not know that on any given day, 2 out of 3 Facebook users in a given week, 2 out of 3 Facebook users visit a local business page. So they're looking for local business information, through these platforms as well. It's important to understand that on sites like Facebook, a lot of those engagements that are happening at the business level aren't actually being executed on the national brand pages. They're actually happening on the local page level. So if you're a brand and you have, one page that represents your overall brand, and you don't have individual location pages for each one of your outlets, you're actually missing out on a greater portion of engagement that you should be seeing. And the scary thing that might be happening is if you don't have those local pages and Facebook is finding that your consumers are looking for specific locations that are related to your brand, they may be creating these for you. And if you're not going out and claiming them and managing those pages will be sitting out there unmanaged for consumers to post reviews and comments that may or may not be seen by you. And this is really important information, again, as part of your overall digital presence, because 78% of purchase decisions are now being influenced by this type of content. And we know that consumers are searching for it. So again, just really to emphasize these areas of marketing that are now so essential for businesses to be covering. And we know that when these areas are covered effectively, localized social marketing can do a number of different things for your business. Number 1, it can help propel your brand to the top of organic search results. Because again, what we're finding is that things like ratings and reviews and engagement with your pages are becoming those ranking factors that get you up in those results. In addition, they help you build and maintain a highly engaged base of loyal consumers or customers. Again, if you're maintaining those pages, you're responding back to comments and reviews, your other prospects and customers will see that. And again, it just creates that reciprocal effect. And then as a result of all of that, will help you increase traffic and sales to your local business. So getting into the objectives of this research in particular, I think the LSA and SOCi really understood the importance of these areas of marketing, but with local as well as social marketing, it's actually been quite difficult for marketers to really understand what is really driving impact to their business and what isn't, especially in these areas of localized social marketing where customers are looking for something very quickly. They're looking to make a decision quickly. Sometimes these clicks aren't the last touch. So oftentimes these areas aren't getting any credit for actual business driving, to your brand. So this research wanted to first and foremost understand that if brands or businesses were doing a very good job managing and optimizing these areas of localized social marketing, were we seeing increased business performance as a result? And when I talk about performance, I'm talking about increased revenue or growth in that business. And if that existed, then we wanted to ensure that we were able to come up with a way to educate marketers on what success looked like. So if you're a marketer and you want to also grow as fast or as healthy as some of these other brands, what are the areas you should be taking advantage of and what does good look like? So the second objective of this research was to provide that benchmark of what good looked like. And then 3, knowing that brands oftentimes like to really learn from other marketers as well. We wanted to highlight those brands that are doing LSM well to really kind of give good examples to the market of here are brands that are actually engaging here and that you could go out and see those results in the wild. So again, we talked about the brands, the number of brands. So we studied 163 brands in the core of the data, and those brands were in several different industries. So when you distilled these down to industries, we actually covered 10 specific industries in the research, which you can see here. And what was interesting about the research, again, going back to the first objective, was when we actually went through all the brands. So we went through an audit, we studied these 100 brands, looked at their location pages. What we found was that the top 10 brands that scored the highest on the benchmark were actually growing 3 times faster than the overall franchise marketing category. And that was based on a 5-year revenue trend growth rate. So it wasn't some meaningless number. This is actual revenue growth rate. And to dig in that a little bit deeper, let's look at this slide. So what we found is that there is a powerful correlation, not causation, but correlation between really good LSM and really healthy revenue growth rate. So essentially the localized social marketing leaders that we found in this research were sales leaders in the overall franchise marketing category. So when you looked at the total data set of brands that we studied, the 163 brands, on average, those brands were growing about 3.9%, averaged over 5 years. When you looked at those top 10 industries that we studied, and you looked at the brand that scored the highest in each one of those industries or those industry leaders, those brands were growing 2 times the category or 8.9% on average growth rate. And then you further broke down that list, as I mentioned before, and you just looked at the top 10 brands overall that scored the highest in these areas of marketing or localized social marketing, and they were growing 12.8% based on a 5-year revenue trend, or 3 times the competitors. Again, very powerful correlation to localized social marketing actually driving real-world business results. And so that was really kind of the background. I'm going to turn this over to Greg, who was really the mad scientist behind the scoring and all of the auditing that was conducted. And he's going to take you through the exact business results that we got from all of this data.
Okay, great. Thanks, Monica. Thanks for that context and introduction. Just one quick comment. You can advance the slide. One quick comment about the correlation causation issue. This is something, we had this thesis about brands that were doing this well. Were we going to see an outcome show up in the real world? And we in fact did, which was both sort of gratifying and a bit of a surprise to me. And it's probably the case that there's a sort of a virtuous cycle or reciprocity going on. The brands that are doing really well with localized social marketing are companies that are more enlightened, that get it, and that are putting resources behind this. And that in turn is helping fuel their visibility and growth, because they're being more responsive to their local customers, they're more visible in search results, and so on and so forth. So I don't think, I don't think this is a case of correlation doesn't equal causation, but it would be sort of overreaching to say that this was entirely the driver behind their sales success. Obviously not, but there is a relationship, which I think is very important. So here's the data. Basically what this slide says is we looked at thousands of pages, 100 pages for each of 163 brands, looked at random, and there's just a lot of stuff here that we looked at. Lots of data, lots of pages, lots of interaction. So let's go to the next slide. Across Google, Facebook, and Yelp, of course. Here's everybody knows what these pages look like, or mostly knows what these pages look like. So here's an example for Facebook. You've all seen this. This is a local page for a particular brand. This is McAllister's Deli, which was the actual overall winner, #1 among the 163. And you can see that content. And here's GMB, which everybody on this session is intimately familiar with, perhaps too familiar. And this is also McAllister, same brand, sort of doing well across the board. And here they are again on Yelp. And these guys really have it together in terms of the content that they're pushing out at the local level, their response to reviews, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's go into the methodology. So where did the companies, how do we figure out who the companies were that we tested? Well, they came from Entrepreneur and Franchise Times top franchise lists. So these are franchise brands that are tracked in terms of performance and other variables. We took their lists, third-party lists, 100 randomly selected locations, as I said, lots of pages behind that. And then we broke the scoring into 3 categories that evaluated their presence across platforms, ratings and reviews in terms of star rating levels, how well were they doing, and volume, sort of review velocity, as it's sometimes called. And then we also looked at a number of factors under engagement, local engagement. Were they, publishing local content from these pages? Were they responding to things like Google Q&A? Were they doing Google posts, responding to reviews on Yelp, and so on and so forth? Next slide. Which I talked about a little bit already. So as Monica said, 100 possible points. We divided them into, we weighted them 30%, 30%, and the local engagement had more variables, and we felt that that was an especially important category in terms of wanting to reward brands that got it and were being responsive at the local level, and so that got 40%. And I just had explained that. So now into the overall results. Next slide. So we're going to go through sort of each of the platforms, and there's a number of interesting observations which came out of this. So we see sort of across, in the aggregate, across all pages, 163 brands, thousands and thousands of pages. On average, about 74% of local pages were claimed, and roughly the same amount had reviews on them. The average star rating on Facebook across all these brands was a pretty high 4.27%. And Facebook had consistently the highest ratings versus Google and Yelp, which was very interesting. Doing really well in general about posting local content, which is sort of the culture of Facebook. That's the nature of Facebook, is to interact with your fans and followers. And so people get that that's one of the things that you do on Facebook. So they're pushing out, images and posts and other kinds of content. But a smaller number responding to reviews. So only about half, not quite half, of these locations featured review responses. And this was the highest of the 3 platforms, which is really interesting. And this is kind of the major area where there can be a lot of improvement. Lots of reviews, 1,000 or 8,000 reviews across all these different business locations, which maybe in the aggregate isn't so many, but it's a lot sort of here as a number on the page. And then a social engagement score, which folded in a number of factors. On average, that was 3.2%. Next slide. So I'll go through this more quickly. 85% of locations claimed Google My Business, which makes sense. This is the highest number of the 3 platforms. This is how people think about Google. Google is about presence. historically. A lower star rating, on average 3.45, so a full point below. Very small number of locations doing anything publishing-wise, utilizing Google Posts, pushing out any kind of content, which again makes a certain amount of sense because that has not been Google's legacy, although they're doing a lot more stuff to make that platform interactive, an engagement platform as they now are calling it. A lower number, 48 on Facebook, 36% of locations responding to reviews on Google. Now 2x the number of reviews on Google versus Facebook for the same locations. And this is really one of the interesting findings, is that Google now has far more reviews than anybody else. I mean, a while ago that wasn't true, but they had put an enormous amount of effort into generating reviews, incentivizing reviews for local guides at least. They've got 95 million local guides around the world. Everybody now knows reviews are a ranking factor, so SEOs are working with their clients to get reviews. So everybody has been sensitized to the importance of reviews on Google, and it's showing up in terms of the number of reviews. And then a lower engagement score, 3.5 or 3.2 rather on Facebook, 2.3. Well, it's not an engagement score, it's Q&A in particular, but kind of similar idea. Not a lot of response to Google Q&A here. Next slide. We'll go into Yelp. So Yelp is very interesting. Yelp is an important platform for multiple reasons. Of the three, people are neglecting Yelp. They're focused understandably on Google and on Facebook, but they're not as focused on Yelp, even though we did see 75% of these pages were claimed or had a listing. But there's very low level of review response, which is weird because Yelp is all about reviews. That's the core feature of the platform, is local reviews. Yet these brands and their local franchisees are not responding to reviews, which is just bizarre to me. But they've had the lowest review response percentage across the three platforms for all the locations. The smallest number of reviews. So Google is more than 10x Yelp. I mean, I mean, if Yelp were on the call, they would probably say something positive about themselves. We have lots of reviews in the aggregate, et cetera, but this is what we found. This is what the numbers reflected. And then the lowest star rating, which, makes a certain amount of sense because Yelp has a very unique ratings culture, and many people would, there are people who are SEOs who have a lot of ambivalent feelings about Yelp, but Yelp is also very, very strict about its review solicitation guidelines. In fact, they don't allow solicitation, and there's a lot of sort of a filtration, shall we call it, of reviews that have some sort of dubious status. So they have on average. Now they'll tell you that the average review rating is like north of 3.5. I mean, it may even be north of 5 when you look at all their reviews in the aggregate. But this was for these particular locations, for these 163 brands and their locations. For individual businesses that have one or two locations, it's going to be a different story, probably on average much higher reviews. But this is what we found for the brands. Next slide.
Yeah, real quick, the comment I'll make here too, Greg, and what we've been receiving from brands by this research is more validation. I think a lot of brands and businesses have been frustrated by their Yelp score, and it's really hard to get that score up. If you're a business that's been trying that, you're probably feeling that pain. But one of the good things I'm hoping that comes from this research is a better understanding, again, of what is that metric. And even though general research would say that you really should strive to have a 3.5 plus star rating on sites, what this research is telling you is it actually has to be much higher on sites like Facebook. And then you can anticipate a much lower score, but still be doing relatively well in terms of your category on sites like Yelp.
Well, what Yelp would advise is to get involved in the community and to respond to reviews. I mean, this may partly be a function of sort of the ghost town effect, where people are not interacting with the community and not responding to reviews. Research that we did on behalf of SOCi last year showed that consumers expect a review response, and this echoes other research previously done. Consumers expect a review response within 24 hours, and sometimes with a critical review, they want an immediate response or something within a couple of hours. And so by simply abdicating that, you're going to get punished. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, and one other observation about the comparison here is that if you looked only on Facebook versus Google versus Yelp, you would see a very different sort of picture. from a review standpoint of the same businesses, which is weird, but interesting. Okay. So this is just an illustration of these 10 categories and how they compare to the overall benchmark average. So 100-point scale, the overall aggregated score for everybody is 45.3, so below 50%, sort of in the middle. And each of these are the aggregated scores by category. So you see some are doing better and some are doing worse than the average. And it's just a sort of a way to take a different view of the data. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now this breaks out the same, it's essentially the same view broken out by scoring subcategories. So we had presence, customer care, and local engagement. And then we see that there are very, very different levels for each of these within the category. So what you saw previously was the aggregate score. Some were doing better, some were doing worse than the benchmark, but now you see that it's all over the place. And that's sort of, we got a sense of that in the platform data that I just went through. So for example, on the right side, you've got real estate, interestingly, which is doing really well in terms of local engagement, which makes a certain amount of sense because realtors are all about, engaging with the community, the customer. But they're not doing as well with presence or responding to reviews, which, we'd have to go into the individual scores to sort of look at that. But that's interesting. Whereas you've got somebody like general retail that's doing a great job with presence, which makes sense because that's all about driving people into stores, foot traffic. So they're all about making sure their locations are accurate and up to date on the different platforms. But they're really not doing a good job of responding to reviews in that sort of care category. So just really interesting. And this also illustrates the room for improvement. I mean, there's some fairly simple recommendations that come out of this data, and they're all sort of visually represented here on this chart. So, but we'll talk about those later. Okay, next slide. So here's the top 10. As I mentioned, McAllister's was the overall winner, and then we had, roughly in order. There are a couple of ties in here, but this is the top 10 list, and these were. Some of these were surprises, some of these were less surprising. I had never heard of McAllister's Deli. I'm in California, and I don't know of any in California. So this was like, who are these guys and how did they do so well? But Monica knew instantly who they were and was not surprised by that. Some of these are more household names than others, but this is our top 10 performers assessed on this 100-point scale across all these criteria. Next slide. And these are the industry leaders. So these are representing different industries. They were not in the top 10, but these were the leaders in their respective categories otherwise. And they also did very well, though slightly less well. And we wanted to recognize those as well. And there are a couple of ties in here also. Next slide. So we're gonna do a little bit on the individual industry results, not too deep here, but just to give you a sense of these things. So one of the categories I spoke about before, retail, general retail, we've got the benchmark on the left, and then going right, here's the category benchmark, slightly above the general, and then here's the leaders in the category, much better than both the category and the general benchmark. And ACE was one of the winners, and they had 60 out of 100 points. So this is kind of difficult to penetrate visually, but what you're seeing here is a comparison broken down across the three platforms by subcategory criteria and how they compare to the overall in the category. So the leader versus the category as a whole across these different platforms and criteria. Monica, you want to say anything about this slide before we move on?
No, I just think as we start to show you a few of the examples of the industry studied, you can quickly kind of see how the brands that got ranked high, how they got there. So, just looking at the presence area across Facebook, Google, and Yelp, ACE doing a really good job of making sure their listings and different business locations are visible and claimed, and then all the way through to their rating score. So third stat down, you can see that they're on Facebook at 4.7 versus an average of 4.5. On Google, a little bit less, 3.87 versus 4.8. But then above on Yelp, 2.05 versus 1.45. So again, In terms of presence, ratings, and reviews, and even the engagement, as you see in the bottom, they're generally rising above the industry average. And as a result of that, not only scoring really well on this benchmark, but actually taking advantage of these areas of opportunity. So you're going to find ACE locations ranking really well in the local pack, coming up in knowledge panels. When you conduct a local search for, hardware stores within Facebook, even, they're going to come up pretty prominently. So those are the type of benefits that these brands are actually receiving right now as a result of doing some good work in these areas.
Okay, great. And let's go on to the next slide. If anybody that has questions can submit them at any time, and we'll take them at the end. In just a few minutes, we'll be able to take questions about the study itself or about recommendations, how you do this well. So this is the personal care category, same kind of idea. The overall benchmark, the category as a whole, the leader, and then Crunch franchise in this example. So they are one of the leaders, not the leader in this particular category. The actual winner in that category was one of the top 10 winners. So again, we get into this comparison of them, Crunch franchise, versus the category averages. And just as Monica was pointing out, they're doing, in most cases, a lot better than the category. So, for example, in responding to Google Q&A, 16% versus 4.3%. Better in Yelp responding to reviews, better average rating, more reviews overall, more pages claimed, and so on. So, just the level of awareness of the importance of these things and the responsiveness, the presence and responsiveness of these companies is resulting in these scores. Next slide. Home services, the benchmark, and then the category was lower in this case than the benchmark. So most of these guys are not doing a very good job. The leader, which one of two, Mosquito Joe here, doing better, somewhat better than the overall benchmark, and much better than the category. So that can matter. So if people are doing pest abatement or bug abatement or whatever the sort of keywords and category searches would be in this category, mosquitoes, whatever, etc., pests in my house, these guys are going to do better, and their competitors are also not going to be as visible or as well reviewed in all likelihood, and that's reflected in these category scores. Next slide. So we see again the comparison. You can see in responding to Google Q&A, 11% versus 2.2%. Most brands are not doing anything over there. Their social engagement on Facebook is actually a little bit less, but much better on Yelp responding to reviews. So these guys are acting in a way that's consistent with the sort of reason for being of Yelp. And you've got half of these locations, half of the 100 that are responding to reviews, and that really matters. So let me just see more reviews overall. And one of the interesting things on Facebook, I mean, Monica alluded to the fact that you get these sort of phantom pages that get created if you haven't claimed them. They have claimed almost 100% of their pages versus the category, which is 55%. So that just, it really seems like a no-brainer. I mean, really all these guys should have 100% of their pages claimed across the platforms. They should all be built out, accurate information, photos, etc. But yet what we found is it's not the case. It's kind of a mystery, but it's not the case. And that may have to do in some cases with the challenges that the franchise brand has in working with its local franchisees, who's got responsibility for what. So there may be some challenges at the execution level, but at least conceptually and in terms of a strategy, this stuff is kind of a no-brainer on the presence front. Next slide. So this is one of our final slides before we get into questions. And as Monica pointed out, the benefits of doing this stuff well, this kind of, I mean, some of this stuff is just local SEO 101, and some of it is more holistic in terms of brand management. The important point that has been made in a number of different contexts, but has not completely been assimilated is that the interaction with brands happens at the local level. It doesn't happen at the corporate level. Somebody might do a brand search and get a corporate site and do a store locator lookup and then contact or drive or whatever to a business location. But most of the interaction is actually happening at the near me level. And this is where the real, this is the front line, and this is what has to be addressed. And if you don't do that, if you don't address it, then there are all kinds of consequences, as we're seeing in some of these scores. So as I said a second ago, each franchise really should have 100% of their pages claimed and verified and fully fleshed out, fully developed, which includes images. There should be a local content strategy for Google, Yelp, and Facebook. It's going to be different. Google is evolving sort of as we speak, and there are a lot of opportunities for branding. There's a lot of opportunities for engagement. You can follow, individuals, consumers can follow businesses. There's Google Posts, there's Google Q&A, there's new branding features. So there's a lot, and there's offers. There's a lot of stuff that you can do now on Google in addition to Facebook, and Yelp is also developing a lot of different new interactive features, new branding features. They just rolled some out in the last week. But perhaps the biggest area of improvement is responding to reviews, and I would sort of sweep Q&A into that, Google Q&A into that, is that these brands were just not responding for the most part to their customers' reviews. And some of those could be, some of those can be hot leads, right? I mean, some of those in Q&A, somebody's asking, is this item in stock? What are your hours, or what are your holiday hours, whatever. I mean, there are a number of questions. People have done an analysis of some of these questions, and you've got warm leads there that the business owner or the brand should be responding to from a customer service standpoint, but also just to get people in the door and meet their needs. There's also some reputation stuff. It's a kind of a quasi-review arena now, and you need to pay attention to it, because you can have all kinds of nasty stuff being discussed about your brand in a Q&A context, and just not participate in that discussion. Also, there's wrong information. A lot of the people answering Q&A are Google local guides who may or may not know the answer to the question, but they're just in there answering questions. Most of the time, they're not providing misinformation or incorrect information, but it's entirely possible. So if the brand isn't there monitoring it, there could be misinformation about the company or its policies or its other important information. And then don't neglect Yelp. This was a lot of marketers are thinking, well, Yelp is important for certain categories and not others, and we really need to focus on Google and Facebook. Those are the two big platforms. That's where all the ad revenue is going. So those are the ones that matter. But in many categories, Yelp is a destination for consumers and does have a powerful impact on purchase behavior. Reviews are the #1 driver of purchase decision making, with other factors, but if you isolate them, it's #1. This is what the data show. And last but not least, and this is very important for people that know this or saw recently the Fresh Chalk sort of analysis of 150,000 business websites, Yelp ranks for most local category searches, not necessarily a brand search, but if you're doing a category search in different geographies around the country, sort of location plus category, chances are they're going to be in the top 5 or the top 3. I think the data point was like 92% of the time a Yelp link is in the top 5 positions. So it's really important as an SEO strategy to be there on Yelp. You want to be in the local pack. Obviously, if you're doing paid, that's a different story. But if you want to be in the local pack and you want to be in organic, you want to be in Yelp as well. So these are pretty simple to see and harder to execute on an ongoing basis, especially if you're talking about massive scale. But really, this is what brands need to strive for. I mean, there's really no way around this. You ignore this stuff at your own peril, and you really need to be investing and paying attention to these things. I don't know, Monica, if you want to say anything about any of that stuff, and certainly you can talk about this.
No, I think the important part here is that, and I think it does seem like pretty simple. I think the challenge has been in the past that there was never really an understanding of, so what, so what I don't claim all my locations, so what I don't get back to those critical reviews. I think hopefully through this research, brands and businesses will start to get a better understanding of the financial impact to your business if these areas of marketing go unnoticed and unmanaged. There are huge areas of opportunities, as Greg mentioned, for your presence, building your reputation, and really, again, just driving revenue and traffic to your businesses. So as Greg mentioned, I mean, if you choose not to focus here and manage these areas, it will be at your own peril. These are fast-growing areas of marketing that are driving business decision-making. And the brands that are ranking right now above the categories are reaping all of the rewards right now. So what I hope everybody is able to take away from this research, and again, here's a link. You can go to lsmbenchmark.com where you can actually download the full study, the full research report, and go through all the categories and see all of the interesting data points that we kind of summarized here. In addition to that, you could also, if you were not one of the brands that were featured in the study, but you're interested in seeing how your brand is ranking in localized social marketing, you can go to this site and request your own LSM benchmark score, which will give your brand a full audit and show how it compares to the average industry. And then I'm hoping that by doing that, you're going to have a really good roadmap to what you need to do as a brand to really start taking advantage of these areas of marketing and just driving just better results for your business.
Okay, so we've got a number of questions here. Some of them are overlapping. A lot of them have to do with review best practices. So the first one, you can answer this, Monica. This is the business that you're in. What recommendations do you have for getting staff at different locations on board to respond to reviews in a timely manner? So the people in the local stores or offices, business locations, how do you get them to participate and respond in a timely manner? What are your recommendations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one that I think is easier if you have fewer locations and harder as if you're managing hundreds and thousands of locations, of course. I think a big part of that is first educating your businesses on the importance of ratings and reviews and what that is driving for them. So a lot of the brands that we work with, a pretty big component of the programs and programs that we help run is doing regular educational sessions with their local businesses, whether that's through a webinar or through posting local articles on their intranet sites that really educate them on these areas of marketing and the fact that it's really deciding whether or not they get that business from that consumer or not. And I think once that business understands the impact of these areas, they're ready to dive in. And we see across a number of brands where you might have one particular brand, you've got a segment of businesses that really get it and they're activating, and then you've got another area of locations that just don't get it yet. But you have to continually try to get them on board and try to educate them. In lieu of that, right, if you don't want to wait to get your locations to engage, or even if you're concerned that by giving your locations full control of it, they might be not responding in a timely manner or maybe not responding in brand, there's a number of really great technology platforms out there that can help you manage that in a couple of different ways. SOCi is one of them, but there are many. So in the case of a brand that has a lot of locations, and let's say you're struggling with just getting responses back to reviews or knowing where you might have a bad review showing up, you could implement a software that would aggregate all of that for you into one dashboard so that you could easily manage that centrally. And if you so choose, you could go ahead and respond and manage those reviews on your own, or through a workflow management within the tool, assign those reviews out to your local locations to respond. Another great feature of tools like this is, if you're concerned about the type of response that's going to go out there, you could set it up where you don't actually post responses live until you review them. So there's a number of things like that that can help you really take control of this really important area of your marketing, in addition to the educational component.
Yeah, I think that's the great challenge with doing this at scale, is that point about sort of managing the national versus local. One question here has to do with our, did we score posting frequency? Did you evaluate posting frequency and the effect it has on your benchmark score? And we did not. We did not look at the frequency of local posting as a factor. That was not data that we collected. Over time, maybe that's something that would be included. But do you want to say something, Monica, about optimal frequency? It's going to vary by category and all those considerations, but is there sort of a general rule of thumb that you can offer about posting frequency?
Yeah, I think it really varies. Well, it not only varies by platform, but it's going to vary by your business. So, there are certain businesses that, I think posting, once, maybe twice a week on Facebook is plenty, versus like a platform like Twitter, more frequently, right? Just based on how consumers engage content in those two different platforms. And then now you've got Google My Business pages that are now allowing for local posting. And that, I would say, would be on need. And GMB in particular, as maybe most of you know on this call, is really created so that you could get timely information into your local audience's hands, whether those are announcements, special offers, an upcoming event. And so again, the posting purpose is a little bit different. We do actually have, for those that are interested, this might be better than me trying to answer this generally, but if you go to our website, meetsoci.com, just meetsoci.com, you can go into our insight section, and we've got a playbook for franchise marketers on localized social marketing. And within that playbook, it's actually a book. You can get a physical copy, or you can download the digital guide. But in it, we provide just some guidelines around posting, around type of audiences you're reaching on platform, the type of content you should be posting, etc. And maybe that will be more helpful for that person that asked that question.
Okay, here's somebody asking a question which I don't have a good answer for. I'm just going to acknowledge the question. I think this is something that requires follow-up. People asking about, maybe Monica, you can respond to this. Google in the knowledge, I think I'm interpreting this correctly. Google in the knowledge panel is often providing links to third-party ordering services, like with the restaurant, where the ordering click doesn't go to the restaurant itself; it goes to a third party who then will take essentially whatever their business model is, a piece of the action, and the business is not getting the direct order, and somebody's expressing frustration with that. So this is something that's been noted. I don't know of a fix for this. I think this is something Google is doing. But Monica, do you have any thoughts on that? This is probably an independent business that is talking about this, but do you have any thoughts on that? And if somebody wants to send me an email, greg@thelsa.org, I'll follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have any specific, I would need to understand this, I guess, the situation a little bit better, but I do know, they try to enable those features for businesses that are engaging with other third-party properties. So for instance, using Resi to reserve a table at a restaurant, I know is a really helpful feature, and one that businesses want to promote on their GMB pages. In terms of, if a business wants direct orders coming to them versus, say, a Seamless or something like that, I'm not sure how Google gives priority to that. So I think that will require some follow-up.
Okay. So there are a number of questions that essentially ask a version of the same thing, which is about there's two categories. A number of questions about how do you deal with review generation for Yelp. People asking if they have to be advertisers. People sort of flagging the idea that Yelp doesn't want you to ask anybody. How do you do that? That's a source of frustration for many people. So that's one category. The second category is general advice about responding to reviews. And a representative question is suggest how you respond appropriately to reviews: long, short, personal, general. So maybe take the more general question first and then talk about Yelp second.
Yeah. Okay. So, so on responding to reviews, I think, the best practices that we always share with our brands is that you always want to make sure that you're personalizing that response. I'm not a big advocate of using any type of bot or canned response for reviews, simply because they're very, consumers take time to write a very personalized review about their experience. And if they feel like they're getting back a canned response, that's not received well. So what we would suggest, and especially if you're trying to do this at scale, it's typically a really good idea to have preset responses for common issues that might be coming up in reviews, right? Or even Q&A. But then really educate your teams on how to just customize those a little bit. And you can do this as simply by kind of restating what you understand the issue to be at the top of your response, and then adding in the canned component underneath it. So to a consumer, I feel like you're listening to me, you understood what's happening, but then you're also, you're providing me back with a response that is brand approved, that your company feels good with a little bit of personalization. So that's what I would recommend. Again, I try to, I wouldn't say limit it by, long or short. It really depends on the situation. What I will tell you is that your prospects, so people that not this person that reviewed you, but prospects looking at your business, do go and seek out bad reviews, and they seek out whether or not you responded. So make note of that, one. Two, based on the research that Greg had mentioned, we know that almost 90% of consumers said that if they felt like their issue was appropriately responded to, that they would be willing to change that review response, meaning they would be willing to go back and re-review you or take the review down, which is phenomenal, right? And, Greg had mentioned that before, where, when you're seeing a bad rating, and businesses get frustrated, what am I supposed to do about that? Well, I think number one, respond. Make sure that these customers understand you care, and not only that customer, but other people looking at your business are going to see that response. And even if there's a no-win situation there, that person doesn't re-review you, they don't take it down, at least those consumers that are now seeing that bad review are seeing your business response, and that makes a big difference, right? So hopefully that was helpful. In terms of Yelp, and even other review sites. So Google is actually getting a little bit stricter on their policy on reviews and review solicitation as well. I think I want to clarify that what these platforms are against are review solicitations, meaning you're doing a promotion or a campaign to ask your customers for a review. And why a lot of these platforms are against that is typically when that happens, a lot of businesses, whether knowingly or not, you're actually trying to ask for the positive reviews, right? And you word it in a way, or you set up the solicitation in a way where it says something to the effect of, if you had a good experience, please rate us. But if you didn't, go to this other site. Obviously, whether you're Google or Yelp or Facebook, they really want that consumer that's looking at your business to have an accurate representation of what your past customers felt about the business. And that means you should have a mix of some, not so pleased customers and hopefully more pleased customers, right? The typical consumer expects that. So these platforms are against you manipulating that to be more favorable if that is not the case. The other thing that they're against is incentivizing for reviews. So for instance, if you review us on Yelp, or if you take this action, you get a 10% discount, or you'll be in a promotion to win X. Again, you're just driving behavior that wouldn't be natural. The way to do this, or the proper way to do this, that accommodates all of the different policies, is really to educate your customers about the fact that your business is driven on reviews, and promoting the fact of maybe the sites that you would like them to know that they can review on. So, featuring the icons for GMB or Yelp on your business windows or in your, on your receipts or things like that. Again, generally, you're just reminding your customers that regardless of the experience, you can always leave a review on these platforms. So hopefully that's a little bit better for businesses to understand. So it's not so much that any of these platforms are against you promoting the fact that you want reviews, but you need to promote the fact that you want the review, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, just two quick points to follow up. The data consistently show that if every one of your customers left a review, on balance, all the reviews would be more positive than negative.
Right.
Of course, not everybody does leave a review. Then the second point I just want to reemphasize, and thank you for bringing up, the point we discovered in the earlier research that most people, if they got a reasonable response to a critical review, would consider changing it. That's really huge. And what we saw in this data is that people were not responding to reviews. And so those bad reviews are hanging out there without, and they're missed opportunities. First of all, they may be giving you important information about a local franchise or a local store. But secondly, you have the opportunity to turn those around simply by asking people or being sincere about helping people. And sincerity and authenticity are the key kind of cultural factors here. So we have a number of small businesses here that seem to be sort of not tied into bigger brands. Maybe they are, but they are individual owners. And I think the advice for them is pretty much the same as the big brands. They just have a sort of in a certain way, they have an easier time of it because they have fewer pages to pay attention to. Is there any specific local business owner advice that you would give, Monica?
No, I think it's pretty much the same. Again, just whether you're a part of a national franchise brand or you're a local business, the importance of making sure that your business is present in these areas of marketing. The benefit for an SMB or a local business is that you're competing in equal ground right now with these larger chains and businesses in these areas of localized social marketing. So for an SMB, the playing ground is level. So as an SMB, if you're in the category of restaurant and you're taking advantage of your Google My Business pages, you're posting timely offers, you're manning your ratings and reviews, and you're doing that across those top 3 properties we talked about, you are going to see a good lion's share of that search volume coming to your business. I think that's a huge benefit here. And that's a wake-up call for the bigger brands and franchises. Just because you're a big brand doesn't mean you're going to get you're going to get the traffic. These areas of marketing don't benefit brands based on your brand value. They benefit you based on the amount of content that is on your site, your engagement with your local community, and your ratings and reviews. That's the reward. So it's all going to take effort, and it's effort regardless if you're a national brand or an SMB, and the opportunities out there.
So a number of questions have come in about, after we talked about Yelp, about how do you get reviews for Yelp? What are the best practices for Yelp? And I would recommend people go to biz.yelp.com, and Yelp also has a blog. If you poke around there, if you get their app, if you look through their site, they provide guidelines and they provide recommendations about how to do this in a way that doesn't run afoul of their rules. So there's a lot of information online about that. And again, Greg, at thelsa.org, I'd be happy to answer any questions after the fact. So we're not going to be able to get to, we still have a bunch more questions, and we're running out of time, unfortunately. Monica, I don't know if you have an email you want to share with the group if they have any follow-up questions, and I'll give you one final question to answer, and then we have a couple of last slides.
I don't think we have. Well, you can actually just go to meetsoci.com, or if you need help or have questions post this webinar, if you just type an email to hello@meetsoci.com, those emails come to me, and we'll make sure we get a response back to your questions.
Okay, final question, and then last couple of slides. There were a couple of questions that were similar to the one I'm about to ask you, which is, which is how do you get started with all this? And you made some allusions to some resources on your site before, but what is your advice to somebody who kind of is not sure about how to proceed?
Yeah. So I think, what I loved about this study, Greg, was that we actually segmented localized social marketing into the 3 steps you should be taking to really benefit from this area. So first, it's presence. Making sure that you have your locations listed, whether you're in Google My Business pages, or that you can find and claim your local pages if you're talking about Facebook and Yelp. Making sure you're out there and all of that information is claimed and accurate is step 1. And then once you have your pages there and people can find you, then you've got to pay attention to the conversations that are happening, right? Are people asking you questions? Are they posting reviews? And then you need to jump into those conversations and start to engage. So that's the care component. And then once you have those 2 things locked down, that's when you can really benefit from engagement, right? You're starting to really build that community. You've got a good presence. And now you start to post content. You start to, figure out what your community is responding to and start getting that engagement higher and higher. And what that's going to do is allow you to take advantage of expanded reach of these profiles. A lot of the platforms really promote those pages that are getting really good engagement from their community. And so, like, to give you an example, on Facebook, if you're getting high valued engagements on your pages, your organic reach could climb up to 10% reach of your community, when on average businesses are getting about less than 1%. So that's what I would recommend. And again, you can go to meetsoci.com and download our franchise playbook for localized social marketing, which has all of this kind of spelled out in a nice booklet.
Okay, let's just go through the final couple of slides really quickly. Okay, so if you want to see this webinar on demand or any past webinars at the LSA, go to our site, pull down insights and go to webinars, and you'll be able to watch them on demand. Next slide, please. We've got 2 upcoming events: the Place Conference, October 15 and 16 in Texas, which is about location intelligence. It's going to be at Facebook. And then LSA 2020, which is our big conference, which tackles all the local topics, brands, small businesses, technology providers. These are, registration is open. As you can see, there are early bird codes there to get a discount on registration, and we'll see you at one or both of those, hopefully. The LSA.org is where to go for more information on us, and meetsoci.com for Monica and SOCi. And thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you, Monica. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions. Send us emails and we'll follow up with you.